It was a quiet afternoon in a neatly trimmed neighborhood, the kind of place where the lawns are just a little too perfect and the rules are written thicker than the welcome signs. For most residents, it was just another ordinary day. Kids riding bikes on sidewalks, sprinklers ticking away, cars pulling slowly into driveways after work. But for one man, the peace of home was about to be shattered not by crime, not by danger, but by something far stranger: entitlement dressed up as authority. He was inside his own house, minding his business like anyone else. A black man who had worked hard for his home, proud of his space, his yard, his peace. He didn't suspect that the front door would soon become the stage for a drama he didn't sign up for. Because just outside, his neighbor, the one who never smiled, the one always watching, the one known for clutching the HOA rulebook, like it was scripture, was standing there, frowning at his doorstep. Her name in whispers was always the same: the HOA Karen. The kind of neighbor who measured grass with her eyes, who complained about garbage cans pulled in a minute too late, who believed the street was some sort of kingdom with herself as queen. And today, she had crowned herself gatekeeper of front doors that didn't belong to her. She marched right up to his porch, muttering to herself about suspicious activity. At first, she rattled the doorknob casually, as though testing it, like she had business being there, like she expected it to swing open on command. When it didn't budge, her annoyance rose quickly, visible in the shake of her head and the way her lips pulled tight. She knocked, sharp and impatient. No answer. She stepped back, crossed her arms, tapped her foot. To anyone else walking by, it would have looked absurd. A grown woman convinced that another man's front door owed her something. From inside, he watched in disbelief. His cameras caught everything: the rattling of the knob, the muttering, the impatient stomping. He knew her reputation well, always inserting herself, always framing her complaints as concern for the community. But this was different. This time, she wasn't just bothering him with letters from the homeowners association. This time, she was trespassing on his property, acting as though his very house wasn't his. And when the knob didn't turn, when the door wouldn't give to her push, she did what people like her often do when reality smacks. Them in the face, she escalated. With frustration bubbling, she pulled out her phone, dialing 911 with a look of both anger and self-righteous satisfaction. Her voice changed instantly, becoming soft and dramatic, dripping with the tones of false alarm. She whispered urgently into the receiver, claiming that something suspicious was happening at this house, that a man was up to no good, even though he was the owner sitting calmly inside. The phone call spilled into the quiet suburban air like poison. Her voice, shaky but exaggerated, filled the emergency line with claims of danger that didn't exist. "There's a suspicious man," she said, careful to emphasize the words. She added details that twisted ordinary life into something dangerous. She claimed he was lingering, that he shouldn't be there, that he might be trying to break in. The dispatcher asked calmly, "Ma'am, what exactly is happening?" And instead of truth, Karen painted a picture of fear that she knew would trigger attention. She wanted to be the hero of the story she was inventing. Inside the house, the man sat still, shaking his head. His phone was recording the entire ordeal. It almost felt necessary now. The only way to protect himself from a false story being spun just feet away. He knew the game that was being played. He didn't need to open the door to prove anything. His patience sat heavy, though, as he listened to her voice rising outside, feeding lies into a phone call that would soon bring flashing lights down his street. The neighbors began to notice. Curtains shifted. A garage door opened halfway, a cautious figure peering out to see the commotion. From across the street, someone whispered to their spouse, their eyes locked on the woman pacing by the door. Phone pressed to her ear with theatrical concern. Those who knew her reputation weren't surprised. This wasn't the first time she'd made herself the center of unnecessary drama. But today, with 911 on the line, it felt bigger, heavier. Karen doubled down. She waved her arms dramatically as if invisible cameras were filming her bravery. "Yes, officer," she said quickly. "I think he's armed. I don't feel safe." The word armed lingered like a spark in gasoline. It wasn't true. It wasn't even close to true. But to her, truth wasn't the purpose. Control was. She wanted urgency. She wanted sirens. And soon she knew she would have them. The man remained composed, settling deeper into his chair. Anger wanted to rise, but he pushed it back down. He replayed her words in his mind, the twisting, the exaggerations, the quickness with which she placed danger on his skin. He thought about the countless other moments in the world where stories like this ended badly. His camera was still rolling, steady and centered. The lens didn't lie. It would tell the truth later, no matter what she claimed now. The street grew tense, thicker with silence between each muffled whisper of neighbors. Everyone knew what was inevitable. 911 calls don't go unanswered. Somewhere blocks away, officers were already in their cruisers. Engines igniting, lights waiting to flash. Karen's face lit with satisfaction as she lowered her phone, finally ending the call. She adjusted her jacket, crossed her arms, as if preparing for backup to arrive. Her smile almost returned as she pictured it. The distant hum of engines grew louder, cutting through the stillness of the cul-de-sac. Blue and red lights flickered against the houses, bouncing across windows and garage doors, igniting the neighborhood in waves of flashing color. Curtains swayed. Doors cracked open. Every neighbor who had been watching silently now leaned forward, drawn to the spectacle that was unfolding just outside. Their perfect suburban homes. Karen's posture changed instantly. From pacing and muttering, she straightened up, her shoulders tightening as if she'd just been promoted to the role of chief. Witness! She hurried to the curb, waving animatedly as the first cruiser pulled up. That gleam of satisfaction spread across her face, the look of someone convinced that victory had already arrived. This was her moment. She had called in the cavalry, and now she believed the cavalry would prove her right. The man inside the house didn't move. He stayed still, calm yet alert, watching from his chair as the light splashed against his walls in red and blue. Everything was documented. His camera caught each sound, each flicker, each smug movement outside. He knew the script she wanted to unfold. He had seen it too many times before. The voices that weaponize fear, the neighbors who clutch false suspicion like armor. But this time, he also knew something. Karen didn't. This wasn't her stage. The officers stepped out of their vehicles, doors closing with firm thuds. They approached carefully, scanning the scene. Karen hurried forward before any questions were asked. She pointed wildly to the man's house. "That's him," she declared. "That's the one I told you about. He's been lingering, trying to get inside. I think he's up to something dangerous. Please, please do something." Her voice was loud, theatrical, meant not just for the officers, but for the entire block to hear. But the response she expected didn't come. Instead of rushing to the door or stepping toward the house, one officer paused. He didn't move with alarm. He adjusted his belt, his eyes narrowing instead. Then, with a sudden familiarity, he broke into a grin. The man rose to his feet. Finally, he pushed open the door, stepping calmly into the glow of the flashing lights. And when the officer saw him, everything shifted. His grin widened into recognition. "Dad?" The single word sliced through the tension like a blade. Karen froze mid-breath, her expression collapsing into shock, confusion, and a sudden flush of embarrassment. Her hand, still half lifted toward the homeowner, dropped back to her side. She blinked rapidly, staring between the officer and the man she had just accused. The suspicious man she had called about wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a trespasser. He wasn't even someone needing to explain himself. He was the father of the sheriff standing proudly in uniform, the very authority she had summoned. And the look on the officer's face made one thing clear. This wasn't Karen's moment anymore. The sheriff's voice carried calmly across the tense air, steady but warm. That single word, "Dad," hit the street harder than any siren. It echoed in every neighbor's chest, leaving them frozen with wide eyes. For a beat, time itself seemed to hold still. Even the wind felt quieter, as if the entire block was waiting to see what would happen next. The homeowner stepped down his porch steps, his posture relaxed, his face composed. It wasn't the face of a guilty man. It wasn't even the face of someone defensive. It was the calm of a man who had lived through worse storms than an HOA. Karen and now had proof that truth always comes clearer than lies. He walked up to his son with the dignity of someone who had nothing to hide. The sheriff reached out, clasping his father's shoulder with a firm grip, proudly acknowledging him not as a suspect, but as family. Karen's mouth opened, but this time, no words came out. She had hustled through her performance, with full confidence that her version would dominate the stage. Now she stood under the harsh lights of irony, exposed, small and shrinking with every second that passed. Her earlier bravado drained from her posture. Her arms, once crossed with authority, now dangled awkwardly at her sides. Her face flushed red, her lips trembling as she tried to summon something, anything that could salvage her story. But nothing came. The sheriff turned toward her, his eyes no longer friendly but sharp with disappointment. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His presence alone was heavier than any verbal reprimand. "This is my father," he said, his voice cutting clean through the air. "This is his house." Simple words but sharp as a blade. Every neighbor heard them. Every doubt crumbled. Every unspoken judgment evaporated. Gasps and murmurs traveled fast. Some neighbors who had peeked nervously from behind curtains now stepped forward, shaking their heads at the absurdity of what they'd witnessed. One whispered, "Unbelievable!" Another said, "She really called the cops on him for being in his own home. The shame didn't just sit on Karen's shoulders. It spread across the entire community like a lesson stamped into stone." Karen stuttered finally, her voice weak and faltering. I was just concerned. I didn't know." But excuses don't grow in soil that has already been scorched. Her words withered instantly, no one believing. Everyone too busy marveling at the twist she hadn't seen coming. Authority had arrived, and it hadn't bent to her story. It had bent to truth. The man's daughter's camera caught it all, the moment of humiliation. The silence, the shift from arrogance to respect. And what lingered over the street wasn't anger anymore, but something stronger, dignity. The father wasn't just vindicated. He was elevated, standing taller than all the false suspicion thrown his way. And next to him stood his son. The sheriff, living proof that sometimes justice doesn't just show up. Sometimes justice shares your last name.